Welcome to another episode of Christian Combatives. I am your host and servant in Jesus Christ, Paladin Actual. Today, I'm going to be continuing this series called Christian Conspiracy Theories. The idea behind this series is that I investigate and look at different ideas that aren't necessarily explicitly stated in the Bible, or if they are, they're stated they're through inference, or maybe they're in alternate manuscripts, things like this. And I'm going to be rating these conspiracy theories based on two factors in particular. One, how plausible is it that this conspiracy theory is in fact true based on the text and other evidence that we have? And two, how interesting would it be? What would the impact be if this conspiracy theory was in fact true? So how likely and what is the impact? Plausibility and impact. That's my measurement system. Today, I'm going to be investigating a conspiracy theory that comes to us courtesy of the Reverend Dr. David Petersen of Fort Wayne, Indiana. He's the pastor at Redeemer, but he does a lot of work online. He does things that help with sermon prep, podcasts on the Gottesdienst crowd, things like this. You can find all sorts of great stuff written or recorded by him online, but today I want to investigate a certain theory that he has about Adam and Eve. Now, the question is, when Adam and Eve ate the fruit, they realized that they were naked and they were ashamed. But how did they realize they were naked? Did they just simply look down and say, oh, golly me, I forgot to put on pants today? I mean, they would have had no concept of pants and clothes, right? Why would they be suddenly aware that they were naked? Now, Dr. Petersen has an interesting theory as to why he thinks they realized they were naked, and it involves a bowel movement. So, let's get into it. Here's Dr. Petersen in his own words describing what he thinks could have possibly happened in Genesis to result in Adam and Eve realizing they were naked and being ashamed.
The passage in question is Genesis 3, verse 6. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. So I think the common and classic understanding of this, what this means, that they knew that they were naked, is that somehow they felt vulnerable, or perhaps they had some sort of body shame. And I think that especially the body shame idea doesn't make sense, because there's no reason for them to feel that way or to have anybody to compare themselves to. I think that it's entirely possible that actually also fig leaves don't seem like that good of a way to actually cover up your private parts. I think that what happens is before the fall, Adam and Eve are perfect machines. There is no waste, there is no death. So everything that they eat is consumed 100% without any exhaust, right? No waste at all. And then when they sin, this that they have eaten can't be digested correctly. And so what happens is their eyes are open and they recognize what their anuses are for. And their stomachs are burbling and they're crapping all over themselves. And it's disgusting and it's terrifying. And the fig leaves, they're not just sewing them together to cover, they're making themselves diapers, and they're wiping and trying to clean themselves up. I'm not going to be dogmatic about this, quite obviously, but I think it is worth some pondering of what does the fall do to us? How are our bodies different after the fall than before? And I think this perfect machine idea is definitely valid, and that there was no waste and no death in the garden before. So that's the idea or the conspiracy. Thanks.
This is an interesting and kind of gross idea, but the fact that it is gross actually lends a bit of credibility to it. It's not really pedantic and, wouldn't it be funny if this was true? There's actually some connections here. Dr. Petersen doesn't explicitly state this, but it's interesting listening to this, the connection between eating and the consequence of eating. Now, the connection between eating sinfully and the consequence of, the wages of sin is death, obviously that's straightforward. But it would be interesting if there's also a parallel between, the literal biological process of eating and what happens after you've eaten. Particularly, I'm thinking, what happens if you eat bad food? Now, we know what happens if you eat bad food. Many of us have endured it. All of us have endured it at some point. What's interesting, what comes to mind when I'm thinking of this sort of thing is there's ideas of like how to potty train your toddler, how to potty train your kids. And either you reward them with M&Ms, go, good boy, you use the potty, that sort of thing, and you reward them and you incentivize this behavior. But there's this theory out there that I don't think we actually tried with our own kids. It was just too disgusting to kind of fathom. But there's an idea of if you just let your kids are wearing diapers, and you let your kids run around without diapers for a period of time, and then the moment they do what they would normally do with a diaper on, without a diaper on, they see this mess and they're ashamed of it. Whereas it would be, hidden and covered and whatever with a diaper on, they're ashamed of this mess that they've made, and immediately, they're incentivized to say, I don't want to be involved with that again. There's some sort of inherent, I wouldn't even just say human, but animal as well. There's an animalistic human reaction to, oh no, I've made this mess. I know it's unhealthy. I know it's disgusting. It smells bad. It's hard to clean. All of these horrible things are associated with the gastrointestinal process, or at least the second half. The first half, eating, usually is fine. It's the second half that's the problem. So there is some sort of validity there in the sense of it makes sense. Like, it makes sense that this thing that is built into our, I don't know, mentality, our biology of being ashamed when this happens. There's a shame aspect to this process. If that is traced all the way back to the Garden of Eden, where you have this perfect system beforehand, that all of a sudden they're committing acts that they inherently know are shameful, something that is shocking and different to them. It also kind of, it goes along with kind of the fact of you assume that there's sort of what would perfection look like when God created, the heavens and the earth, and God created Adam and Eve in the garden. What would perfection look like? And obviously there's a conversation of, did Adam and Eve have belly buttons because of, because they didn't, their scars from the umbilical cord, would they have belly buttons? But I heard I was talking about this subject with somebody else, one of my soldiers, and he there was this theory, I guess, he had online. I don't know if it's this ancient Jewish theory or whatever. They come up with all kinds of weird stuff in the Talmud. But it was this theory that the entire lower half, so the biological system of eating only extended down to your stomach, and that's where it ended. And there was nothing for the rest of the process. It didn't exist until after the fall. Then God designed the rest of the gastrointestinal system, because prior to that, there would be no need for it, which is an interesting, kind of gross, but interesting question to ask. Like, did God design the entire system from top to bottom, literally? Did he design this entire system in advance, knowing that eventually the second half would be used and the first half would have well, obviously they were eating in the garden, but the second half would only be used after the fall? Or did he add the second half of the biological system after the fall? It's like asking if lions eating only grass, if they had sharp teeth to devour meat before, or God changed the biology after. And this is never really explicitly stated. There's never any reason to say, okay, well, and then God, like for example, the snake, and God said, you're going to crawl on your belly and eat dust and etc. There's never any sort of parallel for that given for Adam and Eve. Is now when you consume waste, or now when you consume food, you'll produce waste, and now there will be this system for it. And so there's never anything like that explicitly stated. But there are enough parallels and enough sort of, oh, that makes sense, to at least make this a somewhat plausible theory. I'm going to say, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to give it a 3 on plausibility. I would say if it was a 5 on plausibility, that would mean it's probably equally true or untrue. So maybe if you have one manuscript says one thing, another manuscript says another thing, it's about 50-50. I would say 3 in this case, because you do have to go beyond the text quite a bit to make this assumption. And there are other kind of theories to what changed. But there is a degree of plausibility in terms of eating and the consequence of eating something bad immediately afterwards, whether you're talking about sin or whether you're talking about fish tacos. In terms of implications, Oh boy, I want to say on the surface this doesn't seem to have terribly large implications, but if you really dig into this and you really, I mean, the concept of food and the concept of eating is so important throughout the Bible that the implications of eating and waste being connected to sin, I think that there are actually fairly significant implications. I mean, you think about heaven is described as, this feast, the marriage feast that has no end. We're constantly talking about eating. We're talking about eating the body and blood of Christ. John 6 is an excellent example of this. And in a perfect system, you wouldn't have waste, and you wouldn't have shame, and you wouldn't have discomfort, and you wouldn't have IBS or any of these other things. So what would a perfect world look like? And maybe this contrast of a perfect world where you can eat and you never have a tummy ache and you never have to deal with any of these gross aspects of being a human, maybe this is a portrait of God's perfect design contrasted with how the world changed after sin. So I want to say on a surface level, the impact of this theory is small. But if you consider the larger ramifications of all the passages in Scripture that talk about eating, that talk about shame and guilt, and even nakedness, if you connect all the passages that refer to nakedness in the sense of shamefulness, and you connect these two together, that has some implications. I'm making connections in my mind right now. I'm thinking about, for example, Noah getting drunk and his sons coming in and seeing him and seeing his shame or whatever, and then going out and gossiping to their siblings about this. And if you wanted to continue this implication of this shamefulness of nakedness, the shamefulness of nakedness, maybe they see Noah passed out in his own filth or something like that. Like this increased amount of, and this does happen if you've ever hung around people who drink too much. Sometimes they aren't as continent as they would be if they were sober. So that even wouldn't be a stretch. I mean, I wouldn't again assume. That's interesting. That's not quite enough for its own conspiracy theory. What was the shame of Noah when his sons walked in on him? And does it extend beyond just not having clothes on? But a lot of this is reaching beyond the text. I think there's a lot of very interesting connections and implications you can make here. So I'm going to say in terms of plausibility, I'm going to say, let's put it at a 3. In terms of plausibility, because there's lots of connections, but there's no text specifically. In terms of impact, I'm going to say let's put this at a 7. You know what? No. What did we have for Goliath? Goliath, I think, was an 8. Well, impact / coolest factor, whatever. I'm making up these things as I go. I'm going to say that this is a 7. This is because. Again, shallow reading, not very impactful. In-depth reading, connecting this specific incident to every other incident that talks about shame and nakedness, that talks about eating, that talks about feasting, that compares kind of the perfection of eating in heaven and in the on the holy mountain and stuff, and in the Garden of Eden, that compares this and contrasts this to throughout the Bible where there's eating. Yeah, I'm gonna put that as 7 because there's actually a lot of really cool connections that can be made. I want you to think for yourself. Maybe if you've got some cool ideas, put them in the comment section about different implications this could have when you connect it to different passages that talk about eating, that talk about cooking, and cooking over. Who was the prophet who cooked over animal dung or human dung or something like that? And there's the people of Israel at some point, they're under siege and they have to eat their own filth or something like that. There's all these disgusting things in the Bible connected to this. So if you've got any ideas of these really cool, these interesting connections and how this theory changes those connections, share them in the comment section below. That'd be pretty interesting. Also, if you have any additional conspiracy theories that you'd like to submit, or your pastor in particular would like to contribute, that would be fantastic. Reach out to me, comment section, whatever. Give me your email, and I'd love to look at some of these things. Anyways, that is the end of this conspiracy theory. Did Adam and Eve recognize their shame by their bowel movement? 3 on plausibility, 7 on impact. God bless you and take care.